Hi everyone. I'm excited to read this fairy tale today. This one is another not very typical fairy tale that I didn't know about until I recently read it, but it's full of a lot of good stuff. It's called The Three Little Men in the Forest, and they take actually a very little part in this whole story, but let's read through this story and then I'm just gonna go through and talk about, there's so much stuff in here, so I'm really excited. So here's the story. There was once a man whose wife died, and he had no idea whether he wanted to go and marry again. Eventually, he took off one of his boots, and this boot had a hole in it. And he said to his daughter, who was his only child, "Take my boot, take it up to the loft, where you'll find a large nail in the wall. Hang the boot on the nail, and then go get some water and pour the water into the boot. If the boot holds the water, I will get married again. But if it all leaks, I'm going to remain just the way I am." So his daughter went and did as she was told. The water drew the hole together, and the boot became full to the brim. This girl's father checked to make sure for himself that this was true, and when he saw it, he said, "Well, now I've got to take a new wife." So he went and courted a widow who brought her own daughter from her first husband into the house. When she saw that her stepdaughter was beautiful, and that everyone was fond of her, and that her own daughter was ugly, she scolded her stepdaughter whenever she could, and she only found ways to torment her. One day, in the middle of winter when the snow was deep, the stepmother sewed a dress made of paper, and when she finished it, she called her stepdaughter in and said, "I am craving strawberries. So put on this dress, go into the forest and fetch me a basket full of strawberries, and don't you dare return until that basket is full." The maiden wept bitter tears and said, "Strawberries don't grow in winter, though, and even if they did, they would be covered in the snow. How am I supposed to find strawberries? It's so cold outside that my breath will freeze. And how can I go in a paper dress? The wind will blow right through that dress and the thorns will tear it off my body." "Don't say anything else," the stepmother replied. "Get going and look for those strawberries." In her jealous heart, she thought that the girl would freeze outside and never return. That's why she made the paper-thin dress. Since the maiden was obedient, she wore the dress and went into the forest. There was nothing but snow, not even a blade of great green grass stuck through it. But she kept going, and when she reached the middle of the forest, she saw a small cottage and 3 little men who were looking out of their window. She greeted them, wishing them a good day, and since she was so polite, the men asked her what she was looking for in the forest, especially dressed in such a thin paper dress in the winter time. "Well," she answered, "I'm supposed to look for strawberries, and I'm not allowed to return home until I've got this basket full of them." The 3 little men said, "Well, go behind our house, clear the snow away. Those strawberries have been protected there and have grown. You'll find enough to fill your basket." So the girl thanked them. She did as she was told. She cleared away the snow and gathered the strawberries, and while she was out doing her work, the 3 little men talked among themselves. "She's been so polite to us, and she's so beautiful. What gifts should we grant her?" "I'll make sure that she becomes even more beautiful than she already is. This is my gift," one of the little men said. "Each time she speaks, golden coins will fall out of her mouth. That will be my gift," said another man. "I will grant her a king to come and take her for his wife," said the 3rd little man. Now when the maiden came back to them, they bestowed their gifts on her, and she wanted to thank them. When she did, golden coins fell out of her mouth. Then she went home, and the stepmother was astonished by the strawberries, and she was even more astonished by the gold coins that fell from the girl's mouth. Shortly thereafter, a king came. He took the maiden with him and made her his wife. Now the stepmother thought about how she might provide her daughter with the same great fortune. So she sewed the daughter a splendid fur coat and told her to go into the forest and ask the little men for a gift. But the little men saw that she had a wicked heart, and instead of giving her good gifts, they gave her bad ones. The first wished that she would freeze in her fur coat, as if it were made of paper. The second, that she would grow uglier with each passing day. The third wished that she would die a miserable death. The girl returned home shivering, as if her fur coat had been made of paper. She told her mother what she had encountered, and when her mother saw that the curses of the three men were in effect, she only thought of avenging herself. So she went to her stepdaughter, who happened to now be the queen, and she pretended to be friendly and charming. She was welcomed and given her own apartment. Shortly thereafter, the queen gave birth to a prince, and one night, when she was alone and sick and weak, the wicked stepmother lifted her out of the bed with the help of her daughter, and they carried the queen outside to a river and threw her in it. The next morning, they told the king that the queen had died during the night. The next night, the kitchen boy saw a duck swim through the drain into the kitchen, and it asked, "Are all of my guests sound asleep?" The kitchen boy answered, "Yes, indeed. You can't hear a peep." "How is that baby of mine?" "He's asleep and doing just fine." Then the duck took the form of the queen, went upstairs, suckled and nursed her baby, plumped up the little baby's bed, covered him, and returned to the drain where she swam away as a duck. This happened the next night too, and on the third night she said to the kitchen boy, "Go tell the king to take his sword and swing it 3 times over my head on the threshold." The kitchen boy ran and told the king, and when the king swung his sword 3 times, his wife appeared before him alive and well. The duplicity of the stepmother and her daughter was now as clear as day. So they were cast into the forest to be devoured by wild animals. The end. Alright. Another grim ending in some form for the bad guys, thankfully. Now, I'm just going to go through my notes. I'm not going to read the story as much as I maybe have in other videos because it was a little longer than some of the stories. But I love it. So, first off, there's this trope of 3. Like, there's 3 men, 3 gifts, 3 curses, 3 knights at the end, 3 swings of the sword over the king's head. And I actually am finding a lot of Bible tropes in this story. There is a lot of symbolism with 3. So we talk about like the Trinity or Godhead, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Those are often 3 masculine figures that we talk about, 3 men. I don't know if that's the same, but I'm just going to throw it out there. We talk about Christ's resurrection on the 3rd day after being crucified. 3 is a number that represents wholeness, and there's often patterns of 3 through repetition. Think about like when Jesus Christ asked Peter, "Lovest thou me?" He did it 3 times, right? Or again with Peter, from the Bible, he denied Christ 3 times. So kind of interesting that there's this recurring theme of 3s that mimics, in some ways, the theme of 3s in the Bible. Like, literally, it seems like this queen who was supposed to be dead, they supposed that she was dead, that she came back after 3 days. Very akin to a resurrection of Jesus Christ. Kind of cool. Now, I'm just going to go back to the very beginning of this story. So this father, the girl's father, I'm not a fan of him. He's very superstitious. He had an obvious desire to not have to get married again, which that's fine. I'm not going to judge his character for that. But it made me think. So he obviously he wanted to convince himself that he was willing to do something that maybe he felt like he was supposed to do, but he really didn't want that answer. So he didn't want to remarry, so left this decision up to divine intervention. I would say. Then he was told what he actually didn't expect. So you have to, I mean, good for him for following through. If you hang a boot up by a nail with full of water and you expect it to have water the next day, I mean, you're clearly expecting it to not have water if it has a hole in the bottom. So like, he's like, okay, maybe I'll do this one thing just to prove to myself that I'm okay. His conditions, right? So he had to follow through with the consequence. Kind of interesting. Sometimes I think I used to play mind games like that with myself as a kid growing up, I think, where I'd say, well, if this happens, then maybe I'll go do that one thing that I didn't want to do. And then the thing was very unlikely, it didn't happen, so I'm like, okay, I don't have to do what I didn't want to do. We play those mind games sometimes. It's a little too relatable. Now, this is interesting that his daughter is very clearly beautiful and everyone's fond of her. So beauty is an interesting, it's like a form of currency, right? Of status. Because a girl who can say no to potential prospects is probably of higher status. And beauty usually lends to that, where she's going to have more prospects because of her beauty. And then it's interesting that like the stepmother comes into the scene and her daughter is ugly. Well, if the daughter's ugly, well, guess what that makes you look like? Well, you're her mother, and she has traits just like you, so you're probably kind of ugly. And I'm not saying that to like, these are fictional characters, right? And I'm not saying that anyone with an ugly child is ugly themselves. But you can see where like the stepmother is clearly jealous. Jealousy creeps in, which is really sad. And jealousy is quite naturally ugly. So perhaps it's talking about their souls more than anything. It makes me kind of think of this difference between like in Les Mis, between Cosette and Eponine, where there's the heiress to nothing who gets this nothing but death, and then this girl who has who is given everything and has already been blessed with beauty. Kind of, it's a sad disparity, really. It's not like it's their fault. So the stepmother goes and gives an impossible task, right? Creates this paper dress, which is, I think, akin to, let's go back to the Bible, an apron of fig leaves in Genesis 3. So that's like something of very little protection and more of a facade than actually helping someone when they need covering. Sounds like this stepmother is being compared to the devil in a way, who does not have sufficient clothing for the person that she pretends to be in charge of. But this girl who feels obedience to authority, I wonder, why does she feel obedience? Like she has to. Is this obedience actually unwise, or should we be should we be viewing it as a virtue? I think we can argue either way, actually, but I'm gonna argue that it is seen as a virtue, and that's why the girl is rewarded, not by her stepmother, who is not someone who gives rewards, but by others who see her real heart, her intentions. See, this is like very spiritual story, really, as I dig into it. So this girl goes into the snow, this barren, dangerous, cold, lonely place, and she's actually very vulnerable. A beautiful girl in the forest by herself, and you think there are 3 men in a cottage. Like, you wonder, should she be worried, or is it dangerous? Is being little, uh, does the men being little make them less dangerous? I mean, I don't know, but she wishes them a polite good morning or good day or greeting, right? And even though it would probably be, I would probably default to avoidance. Let's just avoid any people because I'm vulnerable and scared and cold and lonely and I don't need more trouble. But she treats them well. So again, another question: is she naive, or is her friendliness actually a virtue? But we can learn from her perspective. She's saying we should treat everyone well, even if we don't know them very well. Now, she shows grace and politeness, and so she's showing obedience, grace, politeness, these awesome virtues that we do hopefully strive to have in our own lives. And it's cool because she is actually rewarded for her virtues. What a nice thing in this fairy tale in this case. So she's rewarded with beauty, riches, royalty. And this royalty, it's literally an escape from her life of being subject to an unrighteous tyrant, domineering stepmother. And makes me think of the Bible. There's this parable of the talents where Jesus says that to those who use their gifts or talents wisely, more is going to be given to them. And this girl who already has virtues and continues to demonstrate those even in the harshest circumstances is given more. I think that's great that she's given more beauty, riches, royalty. I don't have any problem with that, actually. I think that's great. People who use things wisely, showing good stewardship, even over, I'm going to call them spiritual gifts, are probably going to get more of them because they can be trusted with the gifts that they've been given. So then this jealous stepmother and her daughter, who, I think this story treats both the daughter and the stepmother, so the ugly ones, as the same in this story. So anything that happens to this stepmother's daughter essentially is happening to the stepmother. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind. So the curses that are given to this, to I'm going to say to them, but really to this daughter, to freeze in her fur coat, to be even uglier every day, and to die a miserable death. To those who waste what they are given, maybe they were given this opportunity to marry into another family where they could have learned these virtues, right? Here's the talent you're given, and they squandered it. They hid it away. They actually tried to get rid of it, and so everything was taken from them. We see this principle from Matthew being very much lived in this fairy tale. So this vengeful spirit in the wicked queen, she has this tactic of fake flattery to be welcomed in, and it's interesting that she is actually welcomed in. It shows that the queen's heart isn't bitter. What a good thing to learn, that even if we get out of a bad situation, that we don't remain bitter towards people who put us in precarious situations. I would say that the queen would have had the right to say, no, I don't want you here. You have tried to kill me or get rid of me, and so I don't have to welcome you in. But her choice was to welcome them back in. And then she is again taken advantage of. They try to kill her by throwing her in the river, but then this duck, she turns into a duck essentially. So more virtues given to this woman, that she doesn't die. And a duck, so this is a bird of the water. Because she is turned into a duck, she's able to withstand the evils that are committed by this stepmother and stepsister. I mean, it's not the Swan Princess, but she's the Duck Queen. So I think that's something that she benefits from also because of her virtue. See, she welcomes them in, and she's not rewarded with just this punishment that these evil people have planned and carried out in her behalf. She's actually rewarded with essentially a way to avoid that death or overcome that death, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, she comes back after 3 nights, and it's a lot like this resurrection kind of idea. Like, she's here to be with and take care of her family, and I think it's a really cool story. I don't know if Disney wants to turn this one into a movie, but The Three Little Men in the Forest might be a story about blessings and rewards for exercising virtue and developing and being someone that others can get along with, rather than being someone who's jealous and trying to vindictively get what you want by taking advantage of other people. Now, I do believe that these are principles that we should be living by. So, thanks for watching Three Little Men in the Forest. Hopefully we can live a better life because of it.